Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies, including an occasional series on a director or an actor. And I'm concluding a three-part series today with the third film in a series of films from David Cronenberg in the 1980s. I began with Videodrome and then went to The Dead Zone. Both of these are from 1983. So I'm going to conclude this little mini-series with The Fly, which chronologically is the next film that Cronenberg directed in 1986. There's a 3-year gap there because Cronenberg was working on Total Recall for Dino De Laurentiis. That project fell through as Cronenberg and De Laurentiis had different visions of what the film would be, and of course it would go on to be made, Paul Verhoeven. The Fly script for The Fly was around, and Cronenberg signed on for this project, and it stars Jeff Goldblum, Gina Davis, and John Getz, and it's basically a 3-character movie. There's a couple other characters in the film, but these are the 3 main characters. And Goldblum plays a scientist called Seth Brundle, and he is working alone. He is in this. Most of the film is shot in his laboratory, which is a loft in an old industrial building where he lives in his laboratory. And all by himself, he is developing a machine, a transporter, teleportation, where atoms break apart and then are transported to another machine, another transporter machine, in which the atoms are put back together again. So reassembled in another transporter machine. So you would have, say, like Star Trek, where you would be beamed from one machine to another. But there's a fly in the ointment in this particular movie. So Jeff Goldblum is just absolutely perfect casting because he's offbeat. Even in his pre-fly moments, he sometimes looks like an insect the way he moves around. His line readings always have a rather unusual cadence to him. He's very athletic. He's in incredible shape for this film. And then Gina Davis plays a journalist who he allows to record what he is doing, because he's working on inanimate objects, and now he has to work on animate objects, which is the goal. They have a romance, and in real life at this time, Goldblum and Gina Davis were in a relationship, and they would soon marry. So the surprising thing about The Fly, for me, I haven't seen it in, I guess, 35 years or so since it was released, but which was also the case with The Dead Zone, is this is a love story. And it's a love triangle, because John Getz plays the employer of Gina Davis's character, but also an ex-lover, and he's still in love with her, and he is a bit of not to put too fine a point on it, a bit of an asshole, whereas Jeff Goldblum comes across as a sensitive man, at least in his pre-fly days. So we have this acting out of this sort of romantic triangle in the midst of this special effects horror movie, and it becomes increasingly operatic, and music in particular. Howard Shore's music is very operatic, and in fact The Fly was made into an opera. David Cronenberg directed it. It played in New York City to Howard Shore's music, but it was not a critical success. So the film is a love story, and it's a story about a man who sort of combines with a fly and then degenerates. So in 1986, this would be a metaphor, certainly for AIDS. In Cronenberg's commentary, he confronts that this is a story about AIDS, but he said he didn't really have that specifically in mind. It was basically more the degeneration of a body that's being ravaged by a fly, by cohabitating with a fly, but really by disease. And it's sort of a kind of, and the pain involved, and the pain of death, the awareness of death, and how that affects the people that love them. So it's a very disturbing movie. I was really disturbed by this film. It's very gory as well. The body horror that is always in play in a David Cronenberg film is certainly in play here. But the special effects are terrific. It won an award for special effects at the Oscars, and these special effects are especially good because they proceed by degrees. So we see Seth Brundle as he gradually becomes another creature, totally a sort of hybrid kind of creature. And the thing that Cronenberg especially wanted here was to keep Goldblum articulate throughout the movie. So he does not lose his voice until near the end of the film, because he wanted us to participate, to understand it, and it really does increase the fact that Goldblum is in this transformation, is sort of describing it to us and what it feels like, as well as showing us the physicality of what it might be like for a man to become a fly. And that I think really adds to the poignancy of the story. So it's a gory movie, but you know, it's a very tender movie. It's really an amazing kind of film, a very disturbing film though. I mean, I admit Cronenberg's movies, on an emotional level, they can be really disturbing. Sometimes I don't always understand them. But this was, of course, there was a 30 years, about 28 years before, 1958, it was based on this is a remake. David Cronenberg doing a remake of a 1958 film called The Fly. Now, as far as I can tell, the Blu-ray is of the '86 film is out of print, and I ordered, but I didn't realize that. So when I ordered the film, I got the '58 version of it, and I'm kind of glad I did because it's a really interesting film. It was based on a story that was in Playboy by a writer I don't think was famous for anything else, but you know, it has this fantastic premise. Not just the premise, the science fiction premise of being able to transport objects and people, human beings and people that are alive, or animals that are alive, from one spot to another. But also this transformation of a human being, you know, into an insect, which also brings to mind, you know, Kafka with his Metamorphosis, where a man becomes a cockroach when he wakes up in the morning one day. And it has various other, I think, metaphors or echoes of literature throughout. It's a very gothic kind of movie. So the original of The Fly starred Vincent Price, Herbert Marshall, 20th Century Fox movie, as was the remake. And they were, especially Price had been a long-time contract star at 20th Century. And I hadn't seen that film in forever. It took me a while before I remembered that I had actually seen it. And I think most people are probably going to figure out that, are going to assume that Vincent Price is the Fly, but it isn't. It's another actor by the name of Al Hedison. At least that's how he is billed in the credits. He would soon become David Hedison, and for boomers like myself, we remember him very well from a television series called Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea with Richard Basehart. And that's very much, it's filmed, it's before Vincent Price became the icon of horror films. He had been in horror films before. He's sort of just an average guy in this film. It's Hedison that does all the transformation. but it's a very slow moving, really beautiful looking 20th Century Fox CinemaScope movie in color. This is 1958. It's a domestic drama. This is a story about a marriage that is dissolving through the husband's going too far in science, and like I said with Cronenberg, he wanted Goldblum to be able to speak throughout the movie, whereas in the original, David Hedison has no voice anymore. So he plays the part of the Fly, where when he interacts with his wife, he has a cover over his face. So that's a big improvement from one film to the other. But I don't want to minimize the original, because I enjoyed it a great deal. It certainly has that 1950s horror quality, and it has a really, studio sheen to it. This does not look like a low budget film. So there's a documentary on this, and this is because I couldn't get it in Blu-ray and DVD, goes for almost like $30 for a used or a used Blu-ray. It goes around $30, but the DVD isn't much cheaper. But my local library had a copy of this DVD. It played well. It certainly was watchable. And it's not 4K UHD to be sure, but you can still enjoy movies in DVD. It had the production had, like almost all Hollywood movies, it has quite a backstory. Went through different directors and different writers, and before Cronenberg came on, they went to Mel Brooks. This is a Mel Brooks Pictures production for 20th Century Fox. Brooks had also financed The Elephant Man. So what he wanted to do was he wanted to make movies that would have an effect on the audience, whether they be laughing at the movies that he made himself, directed and starred in, or make them squirm. And so they definitely made him squirm in this film. There's no doubt of it. And it previewed well, it became a big hit. Got mostly good reviews. I did find the New York Times by Karen James. Vincent Canby was the lead film critic at the Times during that era. But Karen James did not like the film. But most critics did. It previewed really well. And what they found, what really surprised the producer and Cronenberg, was that when they previewed it with audiences, the biggest reaction from the audiences was not the gore. The biggest reaction was when Gina Davis embraces Jeff Goldblum, Seth Brundle, who's now Seth Brundlefly, as his body is just, his ear falls off. He's just an incredible sight, and Gina Davis goes in and gives him a big affectionate hug, and that got the biggest, and it did to me too. When I was sitting on the couch here, you really, I mean, that's true love. So there's several sequels to the original Fly, and I think there was even talk that Cronenberg was going to make a sequel to this film, and I think he actually worked on it a little bit and maybe even had a screenplay. But it never did come to fruition. So this will wrap up. This has been, like all these little director series that I do, it's the most fun for me, at least, because you can make all these different connections between movies, and you can see a director like Cronenberg, never one of my favorite directors, I have to be honest. He's, as I said in other videos, he sometimes seems a little cold and clinical to me. But he certainly had, I love his style. He's not a flashy director. We have this gruesome movie, but he is a very classic director, and he never calls attention to the directing, to the photography. Everything is sort of assembled together. He has a great crew, cinematographer, the editor, the special effects for sure. So I've got an urge after watching these three, and I'm looking at the next Cronenberg film chronologically, which is Dead Ringers, which I haven't seen since it came out. It really disturbed me, and I thought I'm never going to want to see this movie again. But now I do. And also, I think after that comes Naked Lunch, which I've never seen. So there might be some more David Cronenberg miniseries coming up in the future. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.